Now, with every tournament, the Africa Cup of Nations is also notable for the uniforms worn by the players of the different nations, whose jerseys celebrate the diversity of cultures on display. And fans want in on the action to show their support for their favorite teams and players. For more on this, we can bring in Matthieu Morge Zucconi, the men's fashion editor at Le Figaro. Matthieu, welcome to the program today. So, looking at the teams this year, can you tell us a bit about the football jerseys on display? Are there any notable teams that stand out to you?
Yeah, what I think is very interesting for this year's AFCON is, as you said, the diversity of designs that we find. I think a lot of the brands have been trying to bring in some symbols from the countries in the jersey designs, which is quite interesting. I think standouts for me are Morocco, which is very interesting with like the design of the star of the flag being put into the design of the jersey. You have the Algeria's jerseys as well, very nice with the nice color touches, which I find interesting. And then Mali is also interesting because the name of the team is the Eagles, and the design of the jersey is using the eagle symbol as a motif, as a recurring motif. So I think it's very interesting. A lot of those brands that are working with African teams are like smaller brands. For example, Adidas, which is one of the biggest outfitters in the world, only Algeria for this AFCON. So for a lot of those brands, it's an opportunity to bring some light on your work, and they've been showcasing some interesting designs.
Now, we saw here with the Paris Saint-Germain when they opened on the Champs-Élysées, people lined up to get in there and get some of those jerseys. Is there a growing market for these football jerseys in Africa?
The market is growing worldwide, I would say, at the moment. We've seen a lot of things happening in the US. For example, PSG has opened a store in New York. Manchester City also has a store there. So it's a global phenomenon, and a lot of countries have a growing market. And it's very interesting for both clubs and national teams. But I think in Africa, it's very interesting to see how clubs from Europe are succeeding there in terms of jersey sales. Yeah.
Now, we're talking about jerseys here. You sort of think of, a male fan wearing them, but the jerseys aren't only being marketed to men, are they?
No, they're not anymore. I mean, if you look back 15 years ago, it would have been, a very male targeted product. But now I think football clubs have built brands, and the biggest football clubs in the world are brands per se. And you could say like Real Madrid or PSG or Manchester United are brands in the same sense of like a lot of luxury brands are brands. So, the target can't only be the core fan base going to the stadium every weekend. You kind of have to go into a different market and target other people. And I think recently in the past 5 years, we've seen a lot of attempts to attract like a female consumer, or attempt like a consumer that is not the core football fan. And it's very interesting because the designs are getting more creative. There are a lot of collaborations as well. And it's in general, like generally speaking, I think we're seeing the clubs trying to step out of their comfort zone and try to go into a more creative field.
You mentioned you've seen some collaborations there. Could you give us some more details on that? And is this part of a broader trend of the football jersey sort of passing out of the sports arena into the fashion arena?
Yeah, we've seen some designers who are very successful in what you would call high fashion, working with sports outfitters to do collaboration for clubs. For example, Japanese designer Yuji Yamamoto has been working with Adidas for Real Madrid for many, many years. Grace Westbonner, who's a very successful young British designer, is also working with the Jamaican team at the moment. So it's a lot of like creativity coming from brands and targeting designers that would be interested into working in a different field. And we've seen a lot of this recently, which is, I think, quite interesting. And it's indeed a wider trend. We've seen the same kind of things that we've seen in fashion in general, like with an attraction to vintage, for example. A lot of vintage football jerseys have been very successful recently, and people are like collecting them.
We've seen, we've sort of seen like a street style influence, fashion designers, and then it gets sent back to the public. So, if we look at it this way, is this another way for the teams to boost the sales of their merchandise, to appealing to a wider audience?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that recently we've seen some football clubs that are quite confidential in terms of like their success in the actual sport, being very successful in the marketing and merchandising side. For example, Venezia FC, which is the team of Venezia, has used in a very smart way the name of the city to like put it on the jersey and make like a retro style jersey, but has been very successful with people that have probably never heard about the team, because the team is a very confidential team when you compare it to Inter Milan or Milan AC or bigger Italian teams. So if you're smart about it, I think you can really go and attract a different type of customer, no matter what your results in the sports are, And I think that's a very interesting phenomenon. And for teams, it would be kind of quite dumb to not like to ignore this phenomenon and just say, okay, we're targeting only our core fan and we don't want to expand our like fan base and a client base.
Now, Matthieu, as demand grows, as you've been sort of saying there, so does the price. If you have some exclusive jerseys, you had mentioned some people are collecting them. Now, is it an issue that some popular football jerseys are becoming an item that counterfeiters are putting out there?
The thing with the jersey is that it changes every year. So every year, if you're a dedicated fan, you're going to have to buy a new one, which is quite crazy when you think that now it's 150 euros, for example, for a PSG jersey. So it is quite logical, but like people are trying to find ways to go around that, and people are like buying counterfeits, it is a problem because obviously the quality of the product, we're not sure about the quality control of it, and it's obviously a problem in terms of like consumption. But the thing is, we've seen the same phenomenon in luxury where people are like buying counterfeits, but also at some point people start getting more creative in their way of consuming. So they're going to buy some vintage pieces. And what we've seen with handbags or shoes is happening exactly the same in terms of football jerseys. We've seen a growth of sale in terms of like vintage jerseys from iconic teams. And it's quite interesting to see that like people are getting more creative in the way of buying jerseys. Yeah.
Matthieu, thank you so much for sharing your fashion expertise with us today on the Bulletin. It was great fun to talk about all these jerseys out there. That's Matthieu Morge Zucconi, the men's fashion editor at Le Figaro.